let's slow this down, because this is one of those moments where if you don't actually track the mechanics, like how courts work, how privilege works, what contempt actually means, you'll miss what's happening right in front of you. Remember when Kristi Noem ran away from that congressional hearing this past week where she was getting absolutely grilled about unlawful behavior? That happened in Congress. But now you've got a federal judge in Washington, D.C., basically saying, I'm not buying what you're selling, Christine. And the reason he's not buying it is simple, because the excuses got too cute. Attorney-client privilege, executive privilege, work product, every privilege imaginable, all deployed to avoid one thing, a declaration on the record explaining why you violated a court order that said, do not send these 100 plus individuals to that concentration camp in El Salvador months ago. And yeah, I'm using that phrasing because that's how this was framed in the original record you're hearing, concentration camp. The underlying reality is that El Salvador's mega prison system has been the subject of intense global scrutiny, including serious abuse allegations reported by major human rights organizations and government human rights reporting. So when the court has told people were shipped into that environment, the court is going to care a lot. The judge here is Judge Boseberg, James Jeb Boseberg of the Washington, D.C. Federal Court. So what does he do? He issues a very important order. He says, Christine and Trump regime officials who were involved submit declarations about what happened. I will assess whether we need live testimony or whether your behavior is contemptuous. And he makes clear if there's a finding of contempt, we may not even need a live hearing in the sense of let's debate whether you did it. The question becomes what should happen because you did it. And here's the part people need to understand. Contempt isn't just the judge is mad. Criminal contempt is the system defending itself. It's the judiciary saying you don't get to treat court orders like suggestions. If you do, that's not politics. That's law. And apparently, this judge already got the DOJ to admit that it was Christine who made the decision to violate the court order, effectively. But he says, I want to hear more. Now, Christine Noem and Emile Bove, who in the original record is described as now a Third Circuit Court of Appeals judge and who was working at DOJ at the time these deportations, these removals, these sendings to El Salvador took place. They come in with the same move. They say, Judge, we're basically gagged. And then it's like a buffet of privilege claims. Attorney-client privilege, executive privilege, work product, anything that sounds official enough to block the question. And Boseberg is like, no, he's not backing off his planned contempt hearings next week. And he says, your privilege claims don't automatically work here because there's something called the crime fraud exception. And yeah, this matters because the attorney-client privilege isn't a magic cloak that makes actions legal. In U.S. law, if communications are in furtherance of a crime or fraud, privilege can be pierced. Courts can compel disclosure. That's literally the point. The legal system doesn't allow I talked to a lawyer to become a permission slip for illegal conduct. So Boseberg basically signals you may have engaged in crimes. That's why this is a criminal contempt proceeding. And if you violated court orders, or the attitude was F the judges, let's not follow what the courts are saying, that can be criminal. Now here's what he wrote, quoted in the record, dated December 8th, 2025. This court ordered that live witness testimony would be warranted in its inquiry into whether a contempt referral is appropriate. The government now moves for reconsideration, asking the court not to conduct such a hearing, or alternatively to greatly restrict the testimony. The court denies the government's motion. Translation: DOJ tried to shut this down. He said no. And the judge goes further. In the quoted record, this inquiry isn't academic. Approximately 137 men were spirited out of the country without a hearing and placed in a high-security prison in El Salvador, where many suffered abuse and possible torture, despite the court's order that they should not be disembarked. The question the court must now answer is whether this occurred by a contempt-type conduct by government officials. And then the judge addresses the privilege angle. There may have been discussions being asserted as attorney-client privileged, but to the extent future contempt was being considered, the crime fraud exception vitiates any privilege, meaning I will be mindful of privilege, but I'm also mindful that privilege can die instantly if you were using lawyers as part of wrongdoing. So he's basically saying, show up live. I want witnesses in the room. So Christine can run away from Congress, but as of now, but she may have to show up here. Emil Bove, all these people show up and tell us what the hell you did. Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi responds today in the record. She says the Justice Department filed a new mandamus petition in the D.C. Circuit to stop Judge Boseberg's lawless judicial activism and defend Trump's agenda. She says his order threatens attorney-client privilege and the separation of powers underpinning our government. And she frames it as all because the administration dared to remove Venezuelan Tren-de-Aragua terrorists from this country. And she calls it radical, retaliatory, unconstitutional. Then comes the honestly disturbing part. The DOJ, in the record, is simultaneously attacking a serious federal judge while pushing this bizarre Franklin recruitment thing. Franklin is helping write the next chapter of America. You can too. We're looking for patriotic legal professionals to serve as deportation judges. Your work will have generational consequences. Franklin becomes a deportation judge. And the exchange is basically same day DOJ attacks Boseberg for daring to hold a hearing about violated orders, while imagining judges as Franklin the cartoon doing deportation work. You can't make it up. Harry Littman responds.
Look, several things going on here. The first, Pam Bondi trying to get, they're back now on the claim that Abrego Garcia and others are real terrorists here. That is not the point. The Supreme Court has made it clear you can't send people out without some notice and opportunity to be here. That's a basic foundation of constitutional law that she's simply ignoring here. That's point one. Point two, all this privilege assertion, which was absolutely to be expected. It's the most, their submission, completely threadbare, just says privilege. That's not how it works, as you well know from your practicing days and now. You want to assert lawyer-client privilege? Okay, we need a log. We need to know what conversation. How is it for legal consultation and the rest? That's even before you think about, is it vitiated because of the crime fraud exception, which would really, really, hand it to them. Same thing with executive privilege, which is a limited privilege. And we're talking about a crime here, and this maybe being the only evidence of it. Third, Boseberg, we've talked about this several times, and it would have been easy for him to drop this way back when. They've used every excuse in the book, including state secrets, including, it's all up to Bukele in El Salvador, including, just let it go, Judge. He's not doing it, and not out of vanity. He represents the D.C. District Bench, And all of them were completely mistreated and exploited by the Trump administration. They spend 3 years doing all these cases with marauders in front of them. There's not a single acquittal among them. And then Trump comes in and just lets it go. Fourth and most important, Ben, I think, they have filed this mandamus action. That's all they have left, really. And that's a very, very hard, if they get a fantastic Trump panel and that panel is willing to totally reach, but mandamus is not a remedy. You just go forward with the hearing. Then if you have a problem, you take it from there. But who's the star witness on Monday? Erez Ruveni. He is the lawyer who was in the room with Bove and others. And then he was fired for the great sin of answering candidly to the court when they said, was Abrego Garcia in fact fired, even though there was an order not to send him? Yes. That's his duty of candor. Bondi fires him for not being loyal to Donald Trump, and he's become a whistleblower, and he's got the receipts big time about Bove and others. So if they try to just, not show up, and he has Ruveni, and there's someone else who's now the guy who was actually there on March 15th when Boseberg says, "What's going on? What are your clients saying?" He was like, "I don't know." Boseberg will have more than enough for a finding of contempt. And if they don't try to resist, especially unlawfully, having Noam testify, maybe even Bove, though my best guess is Boseberg shies away from that. But others within justice, he can go ahead and absolutely legitimately enter contempt based on what he has, maybe even with an adverse inference from the people who don't testify. So it really is somewhat self-defeating. If they don't want to make their defense, the people who are out there will make the showing of criminal contempt. And I think Ruveni is going to be an absolutely explosive.
And again, this is important because the DOJ's framing is he's some activist. But public records show he's been a longtime DOJ veteran earlier in his career. He's handled national security matters. He's served on the FISA court structure. And he's currently viewed by mainstream legal observers as a steady, prudent, thoughtful jurist. Reuters has described him as playing major roles in politically sensitive and national security related cases, and not as some fringe actor.
Somehow hope that people won't see it. But yeah, just for starters, right? Who's watching late night TV who doesn't have a job and sees that this Franklin? I know, that's good. I'll help the future with deportation. But I just want to underscore what you said about Boseberg. Nobody, I mean nobody of any legal knowledge or sophistication in DC would get within a mile of their ridiculous caricature. Boseberg is a judge's judge. He was, moreover, a 15-year veteran of DOJ, a former prosecutor. We often mention he's Brett Kavanaugh's law school roommate at Yale, and just a steady, prudent, thoughtful guy. And they must realize by now they are not going to get him off this. And for several months, one reason it's grown a little old is that the DC Circuit had a case that was freezing him for several months, but they decided it in a way that then gave him the green light to go forward, and he's not gonna relent. And, even if to people in the outside seems like old news, the value to history, of that finding that within a couple months of his, coming right out of the box on his immigration initiative, they were willing to say F you, I'm quoting, we may have to say F you to the courts, and those planes are landing, meaning I don't care, per Emil Bovey, what the judge said. Man, oh man, that finding, and it holds up. That's just a really important historical document, as well as, I think, playing into a larger narrative that I really feel is happening over the last few weeks. You can see it, just most recently in the Paula Zinnis decision involving Abrego Garcia now. A real loss of credibility, and courts increasingly emboldened to say, you guys are lying to me and I don't listen to you anymore, which is stunning to hear from federal judges about the Department of Justice.
That's not just a scandal. That's a historical document. It goes to institutional legitimacy. It goes to whether the DOJ expects judges to be obeyed or merely endured. And for you watching right now, do the simple stuff. Hit like, subscribe. Share this with someone who still thinks courts are just opinions. Drop a comment. Do you think contempt is where this ends or where it actually begins? Because, yeah, when the system stops tolerating defiance, things move fast.